Prabhupada, Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Harisauri ki jai. Ram say Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasali Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Devi Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sri Mathura Dham ki jai. Sri Nagari Mayapur Dham ki jai. Gangamai ki jai. Jamunamai ki jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsimarani ki jai. Samveta Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanand. All glories to the assembly devotees. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to Sri Guru and Gaura. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The last session of Srila Prabhupada the Living Bhagavatam here in Trinidad and Tobago, although we're only in Trinidad. And we'll be continuing on with the topic of association. So a good way to begin this evening's session, a little story about book distribution, since that was the topmost priority in Prabhupada's time. Selling his books, and 1976 Prabhupada was in America. It was a special year. Anybody know what the occasion was?
American independence
and 200 years, yes. Prabhupada was there. It was arranged by the devotees that Prabhupada would visit our new property at Potomac in Washington DC for the July 4th celebration, which that year was the bicentennial, 200 years. So it was kind of like a special occasion. The devotees thought it would be nice if Prabhupada was in the capital when they were having the celebration. And it was actually a very interesting visit in many different ways. But it kicked off in a nice way. We had just been in New Vrindavan for about 11 days, and then early July, Prabhupada flew out from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. So this was on July the 2nd in 1976. A 2-hour flight brought us into Washington, D.C. at 10 p.m. So it was a very late flight. The GBC representative, Rupanuga Prabhu, Prisha Kapi, the temple president, and Vipina Purandana, the vice president, enthusiastically greeted Srila Prabhupada with garlands and obeisances at the boarding gate. So they wouldn't allow all the devotees to come all the way in. Just those three were allowed. They met Prabhupada, gave him a garland. And then as we went through the airport, about 80 devotees were waiting with kirtan and flowers. Once we got beyond the security controls, they leapt and shouted with delight to see Srila Prabhupada. And even at this hour of the night, our book distributors were at work, so it was 10 o'clock at night when they were out there. A fresh-faced young soldier stood amidst the devotees, clutching a book that he had just bought from Pragosh Das, who was the top Radha Damodar Sankirtan Party bookseller. Realizing Srila Prabhupada was in the airport, Pragosh had invited the boy to come and seen him personally. So as Prabhupada went past, the soldier held up the book. So, I think they were selling CCs or something. So Prakash sold him the book, and then he said, now the author's just arrived, do you want to see him? Oh, okay, sure. So they went, in the crowd, and then this boy held the book up as Prabhupada was going past. Prabhupada stopped momentarily and smiled at him and said, Jai, thank you. Prakash told me afterwards that the boy was so pleased by his momentary association with Srila Prabhupada that he gave him another $20. So just see Prabhupada got caught up with that. So that was when we first arrived down at Radha Damodar Party. At that time was about 130 men strong. They had 7 Greyhound buses, they had a dozen maxi vans, and they were all over the country selling books. And in 1976, of course, because it was the bicentennial, there was some special arrangements made. There was the first printing of 1 million Back to Godheads in 1 month. That was the issue for the July 4th festival there in America. They did 1 million copies of Back to Godhead in that 1 month. It was a new record, so Prabhupada was really, really happy. And preaching was booming in America. Everybody was, flat out with book distribution. The Radha Damodar Party were, as I mentioned the other day, sending about $50,000 a month to the BBT. They were selling tens of thousands of Back to Godhead magazines, something like 20,000 big books every month. So it's very powerful, very influential. But in 1975, there had been a lot of friction between the leaders of the parties and the temple presidents, who tended to be householders. Without going into too many details, it very rapidly developed into a sannyasi three-house conflict. It was kind of couched in those terms. And it was brewing the whole year 1975. At one point, Tamal Krishna Goswami, who was the head of the Radha Damodar Party, he flew to Vrindavan from America to see Srila Prabhupada to discuss what to do about this problem, that his men were being banned from various cities by different temple presidents. And then he stayed one day and then he flew back again. And Prabhupada's comment to us was that just see, he spent so much money and time just to come and complain about a few householders. Anyway, Prabhupada's principle was always the same. Whenever there was difficulties and conflicts between the devotees, he would always preach to them, that the principle of cooperation is higher. That we have our differences of opinion, and that's not something to be surprised about. In fact, it's the hallmark of our movement. There's a famous letter that Prabhupada wrote to Atreya Rishi in the early 70s, where I think Atreya had written, complaining about the difficulty in getting devotees to work together. And, everybody was, kind of criticizing, and there was divisions there anyway. So, to him, he thought that lack of ability to cooperate was a symptom of impersonalism. That we're coming out of material life. Material life is very impersonal because you actually don't know who the people are that you think you know. You only know their bodies, but you don't know their spirit souls, so it's kind of impersonal. And in the material world, people are, as they say, hardwired to, envy and criticism of each other and competition. So he felt that lack of cooperation between the devotees was due to some kind of impersonal hangover. But Prabhupada wrote back and he said, no, actually that's the hallmark of our movement, that we have differences because we're all individual. And it's not that, there's some kind of utopia where we come to a certain platform and everything becomes the same, it all becomes one. So that is the impersonalist idea, that everybody, puts aside, they disappear all their individuality, and you merge into this kind oneness, of agreement. But Prabhupada explained that's not actually what cooperation is about. Cooperation is that, yes, we're all individuals, we're all different, we're eternally so, but for the pleasure of Krishna, we work together. And if somebody does something that we can't do, instead of envying them and criticizing and trying to minimize what they've done, the devotees glorify that person and they wish that they could serve Krishna even more. So it becomes an impetus for further glorification and further service to the Supreme. That's the spiritual platform. So differences of opinion are bound to be there. That's a sign that we're alive. But coming to the platform of cooperating together is a sign that we're Krishna conscious. So in that way anyway, the Radha Damodar party was causing a bit of a kerfuffle. It finally came to a head at the Mayapur festival, the Gopurnima festival in Mayapur. And then after some fractious exchanges, let's say, the GBC passed a number of resolutions restricting the ability of the householders to be supported from temples. They were expected, even if the temple president was, or even if the householder was a temple president, under the new rules he would still have to go out and get a job and support himself, and he was not allowed to be supported from the temple. Single women were not allowed to live in temples, and you know, there was a series of very controversial resolutions that were passed. And when they were posted on the wall, then all the temple presidents flipped. And so by the evening there was a meeting in Prabhupada's room. He heard from both sides, and then he made his famous declaration: resolution, revolution, dissolution, no solution. So he said the GBC should strike all the controversial resolutions that they passed, and then he preached very nicely how everybody should cooperate together. That was the higher principle. And whether one is a grihasta or a sannyasi, it doesn't matter. If they're engaged in preaching work, then that has to be encouraged and appreciated. So it was kind of resolved. A couple of days later, I think maybe on Gopurnima Day, the whole Radha Damodar party, there was about at least 80 of them there in Mayapur that year. They all met with Srila Prabhupada. They got a special darshan, and Prabhupada again preached to them that actually, he said, we are a Sankirtan movement. He said, we're not Kirtan. So Kirtan is done individually, but Sankirtan is done all together. So this is a Sankirtan movement, not just a Kirtan movement. So that way anyway, kind of resolve things. So after that, of course, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was sent to China, at least temporarily. Vishnu Chan Maharaj, who was the co-director, if you like, of the Radha Damodar party, disappeared, was never seen again. So the Radha Damodar party was kind of a bit reduced to some extent. But anyway, when Prabhupada came to America a few months later, then Tamal Krishna Maharaj was reinstated as the head of the Radha Damodar party. And they were out, as usual, selling lots and lots of books. So there were two places where there was some controversy. We had just finished, Prabhupada had just finished his visit to Detroit. We were just packing up, and we were literally just about to walk out the door, catch the plane to Toronto, when Dhrisadunya Swami came in. He was the effective manager of the Radha Damodar parties. And then he reported to Srila Prabhupada that in Berkeley, the temple president there had banned the Radha Damodar parties from coming for their Rath Yatra. And in Washington, D.C., the temple president there had banned the Radha Damodar parties coming for the July 4th celebration. So Prabhupada immediately, his response was, as long as there is this simple activity, these arguments will go on. That was his first response as soon as he heard. He said he put it down to simple activity. Later on it turned out that at least one of those temple presidents was having serious difficulties and he was actually removed. But anyway, Prabhupada said, what does it matter who sells the book? books as long as they're sold. So that message was conveyed back to the two temple presidents, and they dropped their bans, and the Radha Damodar party was allowed to distribute books there. So we came to Washington DC, which was one of the places where the ban had been imposed but then removed. And so the Radha Damodar boys were there, as I had seen. Prakash was there with his crew, and they were there every morning for the morning program. They stayed until breakfast, and then they were out doing the airport, so they weren't allowed to come back. And they were missing these wonderful darshans that were going on every afternoon. About 4 or 5 o'clock, Prabhupada's room would fill up, and the darshans were going on for 3 hours at a time. And there were nice people coming. One was a senator, there were some parents of one of the devotees, there was an author of a book, The Fourth Kingdom, Bill, what was his name? Bill Sayer, something like that. One of the devotees met him in the airport one day and sold him a Bhagavatam, because this man had written a book about how mankind had to learn how to colonize other planets, because this planet was inevitably going to be burnt up by the overheating of the sun, and so the entire human population would be extinct unless we built spaceships and fly to other planets and colonize them. So he was sold a Bhagavatam on the basis that this tells you all about space travel and life on other planets. That's how he got very interested. And then they told him now the author of this book is coming to Washington, and so they brought him in for a darshan. So there's lots of interesting stuff going on. Back at the Dancer Institute had their first series of meetings with Prabhupada when they were getting set up. And the poor old devotees from the Radha Damodar party were missing it, because they had to be out in the airport till at least 8 o'clock at night. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was keeping a tab on everything to make sure that they were putting in the time for the book distribution. And again, the mantra was that service in separation is higher than personal association. So they accepted that, but at the same time, of course, it was very difficult when Prabhupada was personally there at the temple and they couldn't see him. They saw him for the morning program, but that was it. Anyway, so they were very dutiful. Prakash was fired up. He was the top book distributor. So on July the 8th then, apart from that little exchange that they had on the arrival with the soldier, he had not really been to any of the programs except the morning programs. So July the 8th, Prabhupada, after a long darshan in the afternoon, took a break for a while by the swimming pool, sitting quietly enjoying his well-earned peace and privacy. He chanted a little, and then he got up to go back into the house for his evening rest. So there was a nice little enclosed swimming pool and had a fence around it, and Prabhupada was using that sometimes just to relax a little bit after the intensity of preaching for hours and hours. Several times he went out, sat inside the enclosure, we closed the gate so nobody could come in, and he sat and chanted japa for an hour or so and just relaxed. So this particular evening, it was dark, and as Prabhupada emerged from the pool enclosure to return to his house, a couple of devotees stepped out from the darkness. I recognized them as Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan men. One of them was Prakash, and the other one, Supudi Roy, a New York devotee. So they both immediately hit the ground in full prostrate obeisances. Jai, Prabhupada said, stopping to stand quietly before them as they got up. I introduced them to Srila Prabhupada as airport book distributors who were just returning from selling his books. Prabhupada's interest was aroused, and he smiled softly and benevolently. So, coming back so late, he said, and before they could answer, he asked, so how was the book distribution today? So grinning, Prakash spoke up, both excited and sobered by the close proximity of his spiritual master. Well, Srila Prabhupada, today Vaishya Shaker and I, between us, we sold 130 books. Prabhupada looked over to me with a big smile and tipped his head from side to side. Ah, victory. Then he set off for the house once more, keeping the two of them in tow. Prakash told him some experiences that he had had selling books during the day. I met one soldier that bought 4 books from me, Srila Prabhupada. 4 books, Prabhupada said, pleasantly surprised. Yes, Prabhupada, and he gave $80. Prabhupada stopped and looked at me again and raised his eyebrows. 4 books, $80, that is a handsome profit. Prabhupada, Prakash said, this boy was particularly nice, and he asked me if it was possible for him to remain a soldier and still be Krishna conscious. Acha, Prabhupada said, stopping for a moment. So, what did you answer? Well, Prabhupada, I told him that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to a soldier, and it was actually meant for the warrior class, and that yes, definitely he could be a soldier, because Arjuna was a soldier. Prabhupada nodded, and in a relaxed fashion began to walk on. You have answered right. This is our philosophy. Yes, this is a fact. Arjuna was a soldier, he was a military man. So Prabhupada arrived back at the house and climbed up a few steps to enter the door. The 2 men hung back, unsure whether to follow or to remain. I thought Srila Prabhupada would end it there. A senior man might have automatically gone into the house with him, but regular devotees would not assume that right. To my surprise and their extreme delight, Prabhupada half turned and innocently inquired, would you like to come in? He was obviously enjoying the association, and he wanted to hear more about book distribution and directly from the mouths of his men in the field. So they eagerly followed him inside, and Prabhupada made himself comfortable on the couch. They sat on the carpet at his feet. Prabhupada crossed his legs and leaned back and stretched his arms along the back of the couch. So, how is the book selling? Just to make sure Prabhupada knew who he was, I interjected and I told him, Srila Prabhupada, this is Prakash. He's the one who's been distributing your books for many years in the airports, and recently he's been trying to develop a program for selling the books as encyclopedia sales. So that was a program that Prabhupada had requested several times, that we should learn how to sell his books door to door. And he wanted that every house would have a full set of his books. That was his target. So the devotees tried once or twice, but weren't very successful. And then in 75 or early 76, they made a real effort to try to figure out how to sell full sets of books. And Prakash even went to the point of joining up with the Encyclopedia Britannica people, because they were famous, for selling people like a whole library. And so he worked with them for 1 month, learning all the techniques. And then they tried again, but then ultimately I think the problem was that there was no real backup from the BBC side. So when people bought the books, they were supposed to get like a standing order. That meant whatever new books that were coming out would automatically be sent. But somehow or another they couldn't get it organized properly, so the whole thing kind of was deflated. It was stopped, and they went back to just selling individual books in the airports. So Prabhupada had been informed of the attempt by Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Los Angeles, and he asked, so how did that go? Well, Srila Prabhupada, Prakash said, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I worked with it for some time, but we determined that it was going to take more backup and more arrangement than the BBT had together. So he decided that for the time being, I should just go back on selling books individually in the airports. So Prabhupada said, that's all right. Then Then he questioned him about how his book selling was going. It was highly apparent that Prakash was bathing in the nectar of this most unexpected association. Srila Prabhupada was sharing the friendly, relaxed ambience of his room, giving him a personal darshan and inquiring interestedly about his service. Prakash took full advantage narrating a few experiences garnered in the course of his book selling. He mentioned a group of boys who were meeting regularly to read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. Our Gita? Prabhupada asked guilelessly. When Prakash confirmed that yes, it was his translation, Prabhupada raised his eyebrows and looked over to me. Just see? He said it as if it was the most unexpected and wonderful thing. So, you are staying here in Washington now? He asked Prakash. Prakash explained that he was actually staying in New York. And then Prabhupada smiled. He said, oh, I was in New York. I began in New York. He said it so unassumingly, as if Prakash might not have known that. Then he asked if the devotees there were selling prasadam. So again, that was one of the new properties that we have, 11-story building at West 55th. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj had already informed him that one of the first things that they did was set up a nice restaurant on the basement level. So Prabhupada asked if they were selling prasadam. When Prakash confirmed they were, he asked him what were they selling. Well, they're selling vegetables and some rice. And Prabhupada stopped him. Kachori. They're selling kachori? I don't know, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada tipped his face upwards. They must. He told Prakash that if people got the opportunity to eat kachoris cooked in ghee, they would lose all their taste for meat. Bali Mahadev, he is in New York, Prabhupada asked. Prakash said that he was. Prabhupada smiled. Then Bali Mahadev, he must cook the kachoris and they must sell kachoris every day. He makes the best kachoris in ISKCON. Prabhupada turned to Subhuti Roy, who was sitting quite quietly listening, and he asked him his name and where he was from. Subhuti identified himself, saying that he was also from New York, but that previously he had been in India. The mention of India sparked Prabhupada's interest. Oh, where were you in India? Well, I was with Gagamuni Swami on the library party. Subhuti started to explain why he had left them. He was a bit captious, faulting Gagamuni Swami personally for not giving his men enough time to execute their sadhana. But Prabhupada didn't want to hear criticisms of other devotees, and he cut him off. So why did you leave, he said. Then he added, anyway, they are working hard. That was generally what, Prabhupada's reaction when somebody started to maybe unnecessarily criticize another devotee, for doing a service maybe that they thought was not being done correctly or up to the proper standard. But Prabhupada's reaction was generally, he's doing the work as best he can, and he would appreciate that fact. So he looked back to Prakash, and he asked him if he would be in New York for the Rath Yatra. Prakash said that he wouldn't miss it for the world. We were just at the New York Rath Yatra last week, or a week and a half ago. Week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when was it? Last week, weekend before last. And this was going to be the first Rath Yatra in New York. So after 10 years of preaching, from 1966 to 1976, it was like a triumphant, it was like the peak of Prabhupada's success to take this, Rath Kart festival down 5th Avenue, which Prabhupada said was the most important street in the world, and then end at Washington Square Park, come back to this 11-story building. When you look back after, before 10 years, Prabhupada was living alone in this little storefront and, with not a penny to his name. So it's an amazing transformation. So therefore, Prakash said that he wouldn't miss it for the world. Prabhupada gave a big smile. He said, yes, it is the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. This will be a wonderful Rath Yatra. Prabhupada moved his arm from the seat back and pulled around the watch on his wrist to see the time. It was getting late. You had prasadam? Take prasadam. Palika is here. So Palika had been added to our party in Los Angeles to be the cook whilst Prabhupada was in America. So I went to find him. When she popped her head in the door, Prabhupada asked what was available. She disappeared into the kitchen, and a minute later she came back. Srila Prabhupada, we don't have any prasadam left. There's just mango ice cream. The ice cream had been sent from New Vrindavan and was still fresh. Would you like some mango ice cream? Prabhupada asked her. Yes, Srila Prabhupada, Prakash said, a grin spreading across his face. He didn't care what it was. It was prasadam directly from his guru. Palika soon handed out several ceramic bowls filled with the solid creamy nectar. So, I will see you in New York, Prabhupada asked. So, alright, thank you. He got up and left for his bedroom. The two men offered their obeisances and exited, the two of them the grateful and unexpected beneficiaries of Srila Prabhupada's special mercy. So that was very nice exchange. So although Prakash, on one hand they were lamenting because they were out all day and into the late evening, and whenever they came back everything was already finished. They'd hear about different things, but there was that separation. Somehow or another Krishna just arranged for them to literally bump into Prabhupada. They were just coming back from the airport after another hard day, and Prabhupada was just coming into his room, so they had this really wonderful exchange. And the fact was that Prabhupada really enjoyed the association of his disciples. Sometimes I used to think about whether, because we like to associate together, you always want to be with your peers, but Prabhupada was so far and above and way beyond us. We were rank neophytes, and he was on his own. And I often choose to think about, whether he hankered after the association of his god brothers. But I saw that practically there was nothing that gave Prabhupada bigger pleasure than being there with his disciples that were out in the preaching field. He so much appreciated, that they sacrificed everything just on his say-so, and they would do anything and everything for him. So he really enjoyed their association at all times. So August the 22nd, 1976, we were in Hyderabad. Again, another exchange with a book distributor. Very nice. This was a few days after Prabhupada had opened the Hyderabad temple on Janmashtami Day, and then he had observed his Vyasa Puja the next day, and then he stayed for a few days more just to see how things were running. So one of the devotees who was there was Prabhu who at that time was a brahmachari, and he and another devotee, Mamihar, I think, they were travelling in South India and selling Prabhupada's full sets to the libraries and to the universities, and having very big success. So Prabhupada saw him there and called him in. He focused once more on book distribution. He was eager for more association with Prabhu Vishnu, and Prabhu Vishnu was eager for his. Prabhupada was pleased to hear that both the books and his disciples were being well received wherever they went. He advised Prabhu Vishnu how to stay fit for his service. He said, keep your health nice, because in India the climate sometimes does not suit. You eat simple things, fruits and vegetables. Don't be a miser in the matter of eating, but don't eat voraciously. You eat sufficiently, nutritiously. Vegetables, fruits, very innocent, and a little milk. That's all. So his next suggestion made Prabhu Vishnu raise his eyebrows and laugh a little in mild apprehension and surprise. Prabhupada told him, even if you don't eat these food grains, that is preferred. It is better. Just vegetables and fruits and milk. That is sufficient, nutritious. And then there is no question of disease. But for our tongue taste, we eat so many cooked food. But if we eat vegetables or boiled vegetables and fruits and milk, that is sufficient. Ekadasi, daily Ekadasi. And these peanuts, just a few grains, not much. So that is also nice, cashew and peanuts, etc. So thank you very much. You are working so much for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Yari Deka Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh. bas, you become a guru. Actually, you were doing the guru's work. Here is a message from Krishna. Please take it. Bas. It's simple. Yari Deka. And whoever you meet, Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh. Either you speak personally or you give him a book. So that was one of Prabhupada's interpretations of being a guru, that you just go out there and sell books. You're acting on behalf of the guru, and therefore you're in the line from the guru. So you're as good as a guru as long as you repeat your guru's instructions and you give out Prabhupada's books. So that was a nice exchange. Another person that was involved with book distribution, of course, was Rameshwar. He was in charge of the North American BBT. It was going tremendously successfully, probably peaked around 76 or 77. Rameshwar was, right at the epicenter of all the events with the increase in book distribution. So on October the 22nd, 76, Prabhupada was in Chandigarh, and he got a letter from Rameshwar. So he got a long report on the state of the BBT, what books were in print, which ones were about to be printed, what distribution was going on, etc. Plus he would also give a monetary report about what the state of the finances was. So, business over, Rameshwar included a humble personal note. He said, "Please kindly forgive me for my abominable offences. You are the ocean of mercy, and despite my offences, I sincerely pray to be blessed with the strength never to deviate from your orders and always act as you would wish me to act. I hope your divine grace is feeling better, and I would like to humbly request that during the month of January, I be allowed to come to India to associate with your divine grace for my own purification. I want very much to completely surrender so that I can help relieve you of any management burdens, and I feel this divine association will give me the greatly needed strength to continue endeavoring as hard as I can to spread Krishna consciousness. I humbly beg for your mercy in this way." So, Prabhupada did in fact bless him with that opportunity, and he did come for the month of January. And let's see here. Another letter that Prabhupada got the same day, again from Rameshwara Swami. He got two from him the same day. The first one was about the BBT. The second one was some recommendations for devotees, a list of candidates for initiation. So he said, "It's beyond our power to appreciate our good fortune that you are allowing such lowly persons, conditioned souls like us, to associate with you. Yet there is no other way for us to be purified, for us to attain devotional service, than to associate with you as your eternal servants." Knowing this, the following devotees have begged it for initiation, and after examining them and waiting for a sufficient period of time, I would humbly recommend them. So he listed 11 men and 5 women for first initiations, and 4 men and 6 women for second. Prabhupada was happy to accept them. Among them was Alan Zupnik, the Bhakta who Rameshwara had brought for a personal darshan when Prabhupada visited Los Angeles in June, and he has been given the name Amala Bhakta Das. So he had gotten a personal darshan. He was with some other yoga group for about 18 years or something, and then he switched over to Krishna consciousness. That group had some land which was in his personal name, but the group ran it. So there was a question of whether now he'd become a devotee, he should transfer the land into ISKCON's name. Of course, that would have caused a riot amongst his previous compatriots. So I think in the end he decided not to do it. But he got it recommended and accepted for initiation then. So that was Rameshwara, hankering after Prabhupada's association. Then, okay, so that's a few examples of book distributors that got some benefit from being with Prabhupada. We'll have a look now the effects of bad association. That's also a consideration. You talk about getting good association always, but the flip side of that is avoiding association that's detrimental. So an example of somebody that was ruined by bad association was Prabhupada's own son. Prabhupada had 5 children. Actually, Prabhupada had more than 5 children, but the first 3 all died very early. He had one after another 3 children. I don't know whether they were stillborn or they died just shortly afterwards, but it took some time. Then he had his first child that survived was Prayagraj. But Prayagraj had gone crazy. He was actually mentally ill, and he ended up wandering away from home and then dying on the streets in Calcutta when he was about 30. Prabhupada tried to get him some kind of psychiatric help, but then he concluded that the psychiatrist didn't know what they were talking about. And this boy just wandered off and went crazy. Then the second child was Sue Lakshmana. She was the eldest daughter. And then the third child was M.M. Day, Mathura Mohan Day. So he's the child, when you hear Prabhupada saying about he had a young son who was very intelligent and was always asking questions. And when Prabhupada went to Radhakund in 1935 to spend 10 or 12 days with his Guru Maharaj, Mathura Mohan was the one, who went with him. He was at that time about 4 or 5 years old. And sometimes the sannyasis, they would tell him, go to Guru Maharaj and take hold of his feet and beg for his mercy. And Mathura Mohan would go to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and he would hold on to his feet. Please Guru Maharaj, give me your mercy. Please Guru Maharaj, give me your mercy. So they all liked him very much. And Prabhupada said that he was a beautiful child. But then he got spoiled. In his teens, he became a communist. The rumor was that he somehow or another joined up with the Naxalites. The Naxalites were like extreme left wing, blowing up police stations. They're still doing it even nowadays. And I don't know how far he got involved in that, but anyway, he got completely disturbed. Then, of course, when Prabhupada took sannyas, he got even more disturbed and angry, because as the eldest son, excluding Prayagraj, it fell on him to look after the family affairs. That's the Indian tradition. If the father takes sannyas, then the son or dies, the son has to look after the family. But Mathura Mohan wasn't really interested in working, at least not in a consistent job, so he felt it was a burden. He resented the fact that his father had taken sannyas and gone off preaching, and that the whole family thing had fell on his shoulders. And so he became a little bit fractious in his exchanges with Srila Prabhupada. Nevertheless, Prabhupada continued to try to engage him in some practical service. So by 1977, of course, Prabhupada got very sick, and he had returned to Vrindavan in late May. And on July the 5th then, 1977, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was keeping a diary, and I think Anand had gone to Vrindavan to meet with Prabhupada, and then he left. So Tamal says in his diary that after he left, Prabhupada lamented that Mathura Mohan had turned out so bad. He said, now he is a communist, but still it is said that he is a strict vegetarian and worships Krishna. He was beautiful, very intelligent, good devotee. His future was very bright. But after I left, he became ruined by association. Association is so important. So that's, a sorry fate for him. I have a theory about Prabhupada's kids, because the other 2 kids were, after Mathura Mohan, then there was Bhakti Lata, and then the last child, youngest, was Vrindavan Chandra Day. I see him 3 or 4 times a year in Calcutta. He lives not very far from where the BRC is. And the MVT gives an allowance to the family every quarter. so I administer that. So I have some interaction with him. He's very nice. Brindavan is very nice. His sister also lives in the same flat with his family. She's like a recluse. She never got married, and I think she's about 76 or something now. Mathura Mohan was born in 1939, so that would make him what, 61, 74? Oh, she must be about 77, and he's about 74 or 75. So they're nice people. They've got little deities of Radha Krishna, so they're devotees, but they have absolutely no inclination or initiative for preaching whatsoever. And Mathura Mohan, of course, was quite inimical. As soon as Prabhupada left, he's the one that brought the court case where he tried to claim that the entire ISKCON was his inheritable property. Right? He was the eldest son, so the whole of ISKCON and the BBT should come to him. But in order to prove that, he had to go to court. In order to establish his claim, he had to go to court and try and prove that Srila Prabhupada never took sannyas. Because according to Indian law, if somebody takes sannyas, then no relative can make any claim on his estate. It's very strict. So he knew that if Prabhupada was accepted as a sannyasi, he couldn't claim ISKCON. So he tried, various means to get around that. But anyway, it was difficult, with him. But he died some years back. Vrindavan Chandra is still alive, so is his sister. But my take on the whole thing is that although Prabhupada had 5 children, not one of them showed any interest in his preaching activities for various reasons. And I think that was that Krishna deliberately covered them over so that they wouldn't participate in ISKCON, so that we wouldn't have to deal with the question of seminal succession after Prabhupada's disappearance. You can imagine that Mathura Mohan had become active in the Krishna consciousness movement, and then when Prabhupada left, there would have immediately been a faction that, he's the Guru's son, he's the inheritor, etc. So at least we were spared that one. Yeah, not other things, but we were spared that trial by all the kids not taking any interest whatsoever in the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Okay, anyway, so Mathura Mohan got spoiled by his bad association. Another comment that Prabhupada made about avoiding association was to a young man who was a member of another spiritual group, the Divine Life Society. They were headed up by a sannyasi called Chidananda Swami. In 1974, when Prabhupada was in Berkeley, he was visited by several leaders of different yoga groups, and there was this Yogi Bhajan, the Sikh, there was this Chidananda, Divine Life, and some other fellow from some other society. And they'd come to see Prabhupada with a proposal that he attend a World Peace Conference, that he was up to, the transcendentalists, the spiritualists from India, to show the way to world peace. So they wanted Prabhupada to come and be one of the speakers, and Prabhupada said no. He said there'll never be peace in this world, it's just an imagination. So he wouldn't join up with them. But anyway, Chidananda, he was one of that group that came. He had his own society, and in late December 1976, Prabhupada was invited to come to this Gita Pratishthan meeting, which was in Wardha in Maharashtra. And it was a group of about 24 or 25 people, different leaders from different organizations, that had been called together for a 2-day meeting to discuss how to popularize Bhagavad Gita in India, because the organizers were afraid that India was losing its spirituality very quickly, and that some special effort had to be made to keep people in touch with their spiritual heritage. So the Bhagavad Gita was the common denominator amongst all the groups. So Prabhupada was invited to come for that 2-day meeting. He really wasn't that interested in meeting with the other leaders of the different societies. But the people that were organizing were very influential. Ramakrishna Bajaj was one of them. Their company was at Bajaj Scooters, Bajaj Fans, all the electrical stuff, that family. And his brother-in-law was Sriman Narayan, who had been the first governor of Gujarat when it was made into a state in 1964. So they were very influential. And Prabhupada went simply on the basis that he would meet with those people and try and influence them, to take up the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Anyway, there's a long story behind that. That's coming out in the next volume of my diary, whenever it comes out, volume 6. Anyway, this is a snippet from it. So when we got there, Prabhupada, of course, would keep the same routine wherever he went. He would always get up for, his morning walk. He would go out and walk in the early morning. So on December the 20th, then we walked around the local college grounds. So Prabhupada, myself, and Jagadish were accompanied by a young Indian man who was a member of Chidananda's ashram. So Chidananda was also one of the people there. He was staying in the room next to Prabhupada's in this guest house. And he had a couple of followers. So one was this young man. He saw Prabhupada was going out walking, so he came running up, "Can I join you?" "All right, yes, come on." So Prabhupada agreed. He told Prabhupada a little of his background. When he first moved into the ashram, he said, he was always chanting the names of God. Day and night he could do so with no effort, and he always felt enthusiastic. But now he said even with great effort, it was very difficult for him to continue. So he said, how will it be possible to regain that spontaneity? So Prabhupada said it was all dependent on association. He said if you live with others who chant, then you can chant. So the boy persisted a little with his questions, and Prabhupada asked him what went on at his ashram. The boy explained that Chidananda's idea was that everybody should be allowed to come and live in the ashram and do whatever attracted them. Some people chant, some people do this kind of yoga, some another kind of yoga. Oh, a hodgepodge, Prabhupada said. He told him, because the people that you are living with are not bhaktas, they are yogis, then advancement will be difficult. Yoga means that there is some selfish desire. So later in the morning at about 9 a.m. when Prabhupada was taking his massage, he said that it was significant that the boy had come to him to get the answers to his questions. He said, this means that all others are simply bluffers and cheaters. Our men are not going to them for answers, but because they are perfectly satisfied with Krishna consciousness. So, any questions up to this point, on any point that we've mentioned? Yes, sir.
With respect to Srila Prabhupada's children, I never knew he had so many children until it was one. Thank you very much for even that aspect of Srila Prabhupada. I was wondering a little bit that stated in scripture somewhere that if somebody becomes liberated, then the generations go back to Godhead. So I was wondering, with respect to Srila Prabhupada's children, does it mean, according to the Sattvic injunction, that immediately they would go back to Godhead at the end of that present life or some other life?
All right. In the Shastra it says that the relatives of the pure devotee, some places it says 7 generations in the past, 7 in the future. Some places it says 14 generations. But anyway, that's the reward, that even if they're not spiritually advanced themselves, but because their immediate relative is a pure devotee, then they also get taken back to Godhead. So your question was, how does that happen? What's the mechanism for it? Do they immediately go back to Godhead? Or do they take several more births or something and become devotees themselves? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, what I'm saying with specific reference to Srila Prabhupada's children.
Yes. So, I can only speak from my own impression. They are devotees. back to Prabhupada's great-grandfather. The traditional deity in Prabhupada's family was Gopal, and also Damodar. They worship Damodar. So that deity is with some distant relative now. That's one thing I would like to do in the future, is try and track down Prabhupada's, traditional family deities with some second uncle or something somewhere. Anyway, the point is that they were all Vaishnavas from birth. Prabhupada's father was a pure devotee, Prabhupada was a pure devotee. So even if it appears that his children were not very inclined, we have to, understand that anybody that was born in Prabhupada's family is definitely going back to Godhead. They don't have to do anything more than that. Because it's not a cheap thing to get a birth in the same family as a pure devotee and want to speak about in Prabhupada's family, as his son or daughter. I don't think there's any question whatsoever that they're going back to Godhead at the end of this life. No doubt about it. If they're not going back to Godhead, I don't think anybody else is. That's Krishna's promise. Yes.
Just a little comment on that. Prahlad had asked Lord Narasimhadev, my father was such a demon, if I have to ask anything, if you can please help him. And the Lord said, that you need not ask for, not just your father, but 21 generations they will be liberated.
Yes, you don't even have to ask the question. You should know it automatically. Any other questions up to this point?
Can I ask something?
Or just you had one question, and you definitely had it. You have a question?
Yes. Association, that's the theme of the discussion. You spoke about good association. Sorry, my voice is soft. Speak
And
about
I'm going deaf.
good association, and then you speak bad association. And the examples you give were like, the bad association was like outside of the association of the ISKCON, right?
Yeah.
Spoke of Prabhupada's son, spoke of Shivananda. So I wondered if you could say something about within the association of devotees. There is good association, and there is bad association.
Can I make a comment on taking association within an organization like ISKCON and discriminating which is beneficial and which is perhaps not so beneficial? Again, I don't have an immediate quote that I can give, but I can talk a little, maybe on the basis of my own experience. That, yes, even within the Society of Devotees, Rupa Goswami explains there are different levels. The majority of the devotees are generally on the Kanistha level. That's natural. Prabhupada gave the example of, a university where most of the people that go to university are undergraduates, and then you have a few postgraduates, and then you have the teachers. So, in any spiritual organization, you're going to have different levels of realization. Most devotees would be on that kind of Kanistha level. They like to come to the temple, and, they like to take prasadam, they like to chant, but they don't really come together for any of the purposes. Once they leave the temple, it's all kind of forgotten. They go about their daily business and don't really do anything for the propagation of the movement. Then you've got a smaller number, who are actively preaching. They put aside their own, comfort and concerns, and they go out because they're more concerned about the benefit of the conditioned souls and how to give them, something genuine in their lives. So that Madhyama platform is really the platform that Prabhupada established ISKCON on. Right from the very beginning, it was all about preaching. And he wanted to create not just a community of devotees, but a community of preachers. spread the Krishna consciousness movement all around the world. So even though most of us, I mean all of us, we were on that third-class platform, but by Prabhupada showing the way and giving the instructions, we were able to come up and get at least a taste of what it's like to be on the second-class platform where we're preaching. And then, of course, you've got a few rare souls, Maha Bhagavats or ultimate Adhikaris. Even I think on the ultimate platform, there must be some different levels of advancement. But ultimate platform means fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness at every moment. So, we see that now. I think that we've got in ISKCON a good number of who I would identify as ultimate Adhikaris, completely fully surrendered to Krishna. Whatever energy and mental strength they have, it's all being applied in Krishna's service. So who we should associate with, Prabhupada made that clear, that you associate on an equal level with your peers. You serve the higher devotees, those who are more advanced, and you give mercy and your association to those on a lesser platform. So, we have those kind of divisions in ISKCON. If one finds that his immediate association is troublesome or disturbing, then you have to, find an arrangement whereby you can execute your spiritual life in a peaceful and happy way. If it becomes too fractious, then sometimes people leave because, they can't settle into the dynamics of the group. So that becomes a problem for them. So we have to try to figure out how to accommodate, at least the managers have to figure out how to accommodate all levels of devotees. You have to be able to recognize what level the person's on and what they need for their continued improvement in Krishna consciousness. So a manager's job, I actually have a new seminar on the art of management. So one of the items that we put on that is utsaha, or enthusiasm. That one has to be very enthusiastic to preach. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, dead men cannot preach. So if you're not interested in preaching, you're a dead man. You have to go out, you have to, strain yourself, strain your brain, you have to spread Krishna consciousness. So, preaching is, the key feature of ISKCON. The managers have to learn how to engage even the most neophyte devotees in some kind of preaching. And then, the differences of opinion that arise that create, factions and disagreements, they'll dissipate. If everybody's aiming for a higher goal or a higher principle, then it's possible to put aside your own differences of opinion, your own ideas and needs, for that higher principle, and then everybody can work together and you get some good success. But if we're all just about, concerned on our own personal needs, everybody has some different opinions about that, and all you'll get is lots of arguments and disagreement. And the whole atmosphere will become fraught with, negativity, and you'll lose devotees because they won't want to associate on that level. So if we want devotees to cooperate together, we have to create an atmosphere and a situation where their enthusiasm is maintained. That's the real point. Not only do we have to be enthusiastic, but all the devotees, I'm talking about managers now, but all the devotees that may work under the managers have to learn how to keep them enthusiastic as well. Without enthusiasm, it's not possible to do anything. And then you get overwhelmed, with all this negative stuff. So it's a guiding principle, utsaha nishchaya daryat. You have to be always enthusiastic, you have to know how to enthuse others in their service, and daryat means patience. You have to be very, very patient because it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over many years, or as we're seeing now, over even whole lifetimes. There's so much that needs to be done. So So we all need that support, we all need to be encouraged, we all need to maintain our enthusiasm. And naturally, devotees will tend to associate with whoever's on the same level as they are. But if things are done nicely, then all the different levels, kanistas, madhyamas, uttamas, they'll all be able to integrate nicely, and you'll get a very wonderful effect in the world. So that was what Prabhupada was looking for. And if we just follow Prabhupada's instructions, you'll see any situations that we're facing now, they were all there in Prabhupada's time, in one way or another. It's not like, sometimes devotees have this impression that when Prabhupada was personally here, everything was perfect. Nothing ever went wrong. But it's not true. There were just as many problems then as there are now, because that's the nature of the material world. We're trying to bring people from the material platform to the spiritual platform, and that means that there'll be lots of, differences and conflicts and upsets and, regressions. People will struggle. So you have to be very patient. A preacher cannot become impatient. You have to have unlimited patience. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I first joined Prabhupada's personal party, was just how much patience that he had. Just a couple of simple examples. That the first night that I was serving him in Delhi, I went into his room about 9 o'clock. Prabhupada was just finishing having a kachori that Harikesh had made. And his plate was sitting on his desk. He'd just finished eating. And then under his desk there was a basket of fruit that somebody had given as a gift during the darshan. So Prabhupada he called me over and he said, now you take my plate and wash it, and this fruit has to be taken to the temple and it can be offered to the deities. So immediately I felt very privileged. I was doing this personal service for Prabhupada. It's the first, almost the first time. And so I took hold of his plate in one hand, and then I took the basket of fruit in the other. And as soon as I did that, Prabhupada, what is this? Melancha? He said, you're taking the plate, it's muchi, I've just eaten from that in one hand, and now you're taking the fruit that's going to be offered to the deity in the other hand. He said, put them down, go and wash your hands, clean the plate first, then take the fruit, to the temple. So it's a simple thing, but, it's not something that we're that keenly attuned to, the principle of cleanliness. And for Prabhupada, he couldn't tolerate seeing his muchi plate being handled, at the same time as the fruit that was going to be offered to the deity. From my point of view, I was thinking, that just by touching the plate that Prabhupada had eaten from, I was getting purified. But Prabhupada was looking the opposite way, and he was thinking, this rascal's committing an offense. So it happened again a couple of nights later, same thing, but this time with a jug of water, and then again, some plate with some prasadam, and I picked the two up together, and Prabhupada stopped me again, and he had to give me the same instruction. So I kind of started to realize that over the years, this was 1975 at the end, Prabhupada must have given these same simple instructions hundreds and maybe even thousands of times, to his disciples. And yet here I was, new on the job, and instead of, Prabhupada getting angry and saying, why don't you learn these things? You haven't learned anything in, 3 or 4 years in the movement. No, he was very patient, very kind, and, always did things in such a way that even if you were getting corrected, that it would maintain your enthusiasm. So I just realized that to be a preacher, you have to have so many qualities. You have to have this tremendous patience. When I first read the Nectar of Instruction, and I read that verse, it actually caused a puzzle in my brain, that how do you become enthusiastic and at the same time be patient? I couldn't put the two together. To me, they were like opposite poles. That, if you're patient, then you wait, very steady. If you're enthusiastic, you're out there running here and there, which is, that's our idea of enthusiasm, not a passion. Right? Run here and there and get this done and get that done, and the brain's firing and the muscles are, straining, and you want to achieve something. But that kind of enthusiasm is not the kind of enthusiasm that Rupa Goswami is talking about. He's talking about the enthusiasm where you're fully committed to Krishna consciousness, even when things are going adversely, and not just maybe one time, but many, many times. Like Srila Prabhupada, he's the ideal emblem of enthusiasm, because when, we read that letter the other day that he got from the office of the governor of Bihar. Don't ask for any money, don't ask for any connection with publishers, don't even show your manuscripts, don't ask for any help whatsoever. In fact, it's better that you don't come. And still Prabhupada went there. No, I'm coming on a culture and peace mission. I'm not going to say anything about my books. That's enthusiasm. And Prabhupada maintained that for many, many years. He was in Jhansi for a number of years. That was the place that he chose to begin his individual preaching. He became a Vanaprastha, I think, around about 1954. But he was well into his preaching by that time anyway. He told me one time when we were in France in '76, he was just taking his evening massage, and it was quiet, lights were out, and he was just massaging his legs up and down. And then he said, from 1954 to 1966, he said, that 12 years was the hardest time of my life. He said, but now, he said, I see that that was my greatest asset. So he went for at least 12 years. He said, a yuga, one yuga. I said, a yuga, Srila Prabhupada? He said, yes, a mini yuga. Right? Yugayatam Nimishayana, Chakshusha Prabhushayana. So, Prabhupada struggled alone. I mean, not just for like a year or 2 years. For 12 long years, he had nothing. There was no help coming from anywhere. He had a group of medical students staying with him in Jhansi, but they weren't really interested. It was just a place that they could stay and hang out. They liked Prabhupada personally, but they weren't really very serious. Just one of them was a little bit serious. That was Prabhakar Misra. So he got initiated in Haridas sometime in 54 or 55. But even he, wouldn't always cooperate. And Prabhupada sometimes, because Prabhakar, if you look at the memories videos that Siddhanta shot, there's all the interviews with different disciples. So in his interview, he's recalling about the times that they were in Jhansi. And he said Prabhupada would want to go out on Padayatra. None of the other students would come. So sometimes it was just Prabhupada and Prabhakar, and sometimes it was just Prabhupada. And he would walk from Jhansi to, some of the local village, walking and chanting, playing carousels all the way by himself. And he would get there, and then he would chant and preach a little bit, and then he would walk all the way back again by himself. And later on, when he started doing his writing, because he had started this society called the League of Devotees, that was started in Jhansi also. So in October 76, I saw one of the devotees was reading from one of Prabhupada's original Indian printed Srimad Bhagavatam's Canto 1, Part 1. So I was curious to see it. I looked in the front, and it said, published by the League of Devotees. So that's plural. So I was thinking, I wonder who the League of Devotees actually were. And at that time, we didn't have the complete biography. There was no Leelamrita. We had a short biography of Prabhupada, but there were many, many fine details that we didn't know about. So we were always eager, if Prabhupada was in the mood, we were always eager to try to get, further information about his life before ISKCON. So I've seen this book printed by the League of Devotees. I went into Prabhupada's room, and somebody had given a picture Prabhupada when he took sannyas, the famous picture with Keshav Maharaj, then there's another gentleman who became Bhaktivedanta Muni Maharaj, and Prabhupada became Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. So Prabhupada was looking at that. I showed Prabhupada the picture. He actually said it's not such a good picture. He didn't have a high opinion on it, but that was the day he took sannyas. And so he started reminiscing a little bit about, how he got to take sannyas and his preaching and all that, stuff that was in Jhansi. And I had it in my brain, I want to find out who this League of Devotees is. So I asked him, in that book there it says that it was published by the League. So who actually were they? And I was thinking maybe he was working with some God brothers or something like that. So Prabhupada answered, but he didn't give me a direct answer. So then after a minute I asked him again, yes, but who is this League of Devotees? So then he answered again, but he still didn't give me a full answer. And so I asked him a third time, I was kind of persistent. So I said, yeah, but I'm just wondering who this League of Devotees is. Was that you and, just you, or some God brothers, or what? So Prabhupada stopped and he laughed. He said, oh, the League. He said, that was me. He said, I was trying to do something. He said, these medical students were there, but they were not joining, and they were not serious. So he said, it was just me. And another story that he told us in September of '76, we were having a meeting with the managers in Vrindavan. It was a big headache every time Prabhupada came to Vrindavan. The managers really didn't, have the knack of knowing how things worked in India. So they were always getting cheated in different ways. They were way over budget, so Prabhupada had to sit down and go over every last penny, every last rupee, how they were spending it. They were spending something like 10,000 rupees a month to run the whole temple, and Prabhupada decided that they could only spend 1,000 rupees. And he sat with Bagaji. He was a local man. He used to come and help. And they actually, they worked out for the kitchen, because that was where one of the big expenditures was. They sat down, they worked out what every single preparation should be on the deity plates. First of all, they cut the deity plates from 10 plates to 6, because there were 3 altars, there were 10 individual deities, and each deity would get a big plate every offering. So Prabhupada cut that back to 6, 2 plates for each altar. And they went into such detail that they actually calculated how much flour it took to make one puri, and how much ghee it took to cook that puri. And then they worked out, how much it should cost. Anyway, this is the kind of detail that Prabhupada was getting into to try and train us how to manage properly. And so at this particular meeting, Prabhupada stopped after about 3/4 of an hour or an hour, and he just rubbed his head. He said, all right, he said, finish. He said, now I'm getting brain fag. And I'd never heard that expression, so I said, brain fag, Srila Prabhupada, what's brain fag? And he looked at me, he said, brain fag. And then he told a story that how he was one time out in Delhi selling his back to Godhead. And so he was walking in the street, it was very, very hot, and he said, I developed brain fag. He said, I was reeling like a drunkard. So he got sunstroke, so his brain literally stopped working. I don't know if anybody's ever had sunstroke, but if you really get it, it feels like the brains have become completely scrambled. You can't actually think straight, and you lose your motor function. So Prabhupada was reeling in the street like a drunkard. He said, just at that moment, a friend of mine went past in a car. What's the chance of that in a big city? Just at that moment, a friend goes past, and especially in the 50s when people didn't have vehicles, not so many. Anyway, his friend just saw him and took him in the car and took him home, gave him some medicine, and he said then I was okay. So that was brain fag. But the point there is that was Srila Prabhupada. He was writing the Back to Godhead, he was editing it, he he was doing the layout, he was buying the paper, he was supervising the printing, and then he was going out and selling it. And he was to the point where he was collapsing in the street with no help from anybody. So he said that, that 12 years from 54 to 66 was the toughest time of his life. But looking back, it was his greatest asset. The point that I'm making is that he was enthusiastic. He had to wait many, many years before he saw any fruits of his labor, hard labor, in his preaching. I mean, nobody was trying harder than Srila Prabhupada to do preaching work, and he wasn't getting any result. And he would, you would think that he would become discouraged, but he wasn't. He was enthusiastic at all times, and the tougher it got, the more Prabhupada tried. So, as a principle of management, to get back to our theme, the whole principle rests on enthusiasm. And the managers themselves, they have to be enthusiastic, they have to maintain their own enthusiasm by strictly following the principles and chanting and participating in the regular sadhana. And at the same time, they have to know the art of maintaining the enthusiasm of all the devotees. No matter who they are, you get a whole variety, everybody's different. Everybody's different. So everybody needs a little bit of special care and affection, and they need a little bit of special encouragement. And if you can keep a person's enthusiasm up, they'll do anything. And then everything goes very wonderfully, goes very smoothly. So the principle of association means to get to a point of cooperation. Association should lead to cooperation. If you're really associating properly with someone, as we read the other day, real association means you're developing love for them. So Prabhupada loved us, and he often said that these boys and girls, why have they given up everything, left their homes, all their wealth and everything else to join me? Because they loved me. So he accepted that. So that was the reciprocation. We did all the things that we did, and there was amazing stuff going on sometimes. We read a little bit there about Pragosh, but there was amazing preaching going on. Devotees risking their lives just on the say-so of Srila Prabhupada. Now, why would they do that? I'll give you an example. Ramananda. I was with him a few months back, and he was telling us the story. I think I saw a video of it as well. He was telling the story about how he went to Pakistan. So Prabhupada had a desire that there should be some preaching in Pakistan because there's so many Hindus there. And so he had written to Gagamuni and Brahmananda that if you can, I'd like you to go to Pakistan and establish a center there. That would be a great victory to do that. So they decided Brahmananda would go to West Pakistan and Gagamuni would go to East Pakistan. The problem was that when they went there, they walked right into the middle of a war. A war. It was 1971. East Pakistan and West Pakistan were breaking up. East Pakistan wanted to become Bangladesh. So the West Pakistan army invaded East Pakistan. And then the Indian government sent hundreds of thousands of Indian soldiers to protect the newly formed Bangladesh and drive the West Pakistan army back out again. So there was a full-on war going on. And in the middle of that, Ramananda turns up in West Pakistan. I'm not sure whether he had somebody with him or not. I think he had one assistant. And immediately, they were arrested, and it was a very dangerous situation. They went in there as Hindu monks. And Gagamuni, the same thing. I think he was with Pushta Krishna in East Pakistan. And again, they were arrested and then told to leave. They went on a bus. At a certain point, the bus made an unscheduled stop. Everybody in the bus was freaking out because previous incidences, buses had been stopped with, refugees in them. Everybody had been taken out the bus, lined up against the side and shot dead. They were machine gunned. and the bus was stopped, they were taken out, there's all these guys with, guns, and at one point they were threatened that they were going to be shot, and from what I remember, pushed to Krishna. He opened up his kurta and he said, "Go ahead, shoot me, I'm not this body." I mean, we laugh now, but somebody's there and there was genocide going on. And that apparently so impressed the guys that had bailed them up that they let them go. Because they're Americans as well, and I think they were a bit afraid of shooting American citizens in case that made a problem, because they checked their passports. But my point is that they went there and risked their lives, literally, on Prabhupada's say-so, that's all. And when Prabhupada heard that he was in Bombay, he heard that they'd gone there, and he'd actually sent another letter telling them, now don't go because there's a problem, with the war. But they didn't get that letter, and so they went. And then a newspaper report came in the Bombay newspaper that 4 American members of the Hare Krishna movement had been shot dead in Pakistan. There was no further information. So Prabhupada was in so much anxiety, like for a day, 2 days. All he could think about was that he'd sent these boys to Pakistan and they'd been shot dead, but it wasn't confirmed. Somehow or another, it was fortunately misinformation. It wasn't true. And then Brahmananda suddenly turned up in Bombay and walked into Prabhupada's rooms. Prabhupada jumped up, grabbed his arms around, and he was, like with a small child, you pat him on the head and on the shoulders. And Brahmananda said he was just patting him all over his body. So happy to see him. So I think he said that it was worth going to Pakistan just to get that. So, that reciprocation, that love, was developed, in association and on the principle of cooperation, because we cooperated with Srila Prabhupada, he cooperated with us. Everything blossomed, everything became very successful. There were tremendous things that were going on in that era because there was this mood of cooperation. But there was always the fractures, the splits, the disagreements, even in Prabhupada's time. There was, the first major split from ISKCON was in 1973. It wasn't after Prabhupada left, it was before he left. That was, the group that joined in Hawaii under this Siddharupananda. So they joined for, 2 or 3 years, and then they split away from ISKCON. It was a big shock for Prabhupada. But even he pleaded with them many times and preached to them they would not come back and cooperate, with their God brothers and God sisters in ISKCON. So, these things are possible. As managers, you learn that you can't please everybody all of the time. But you have to at least try to engage people in such a way that they feel enthusiastic. And if you can maintain the level of enthusiasm, then you get cooperation automatically. But if people are not feeling enthusiastic, they won't do anything. They won't cooperate. So this is, that enthusiasm, one's own enthusiasm, and the ability to create enthusiasm in others is the key ingredient for, cooperatively spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. Is that all right? Raj,
As we are coming up to ISKCON's 50th anniversary, I was wondering what advice you can give us, a society, our devotees, congregation, everyone. What could we do in the interest of, Srila Prabhupada, according to his desire, what could we do to push on? The first day you were mentioning, while you were speaking, you were mentioning about a set of books in every home or everybody getting prashadam. So what would you recommend? Because devotees are in all different categories. So to really honor Srila Prabhupada on the 50th anniversary, what is something practical all members of the society could do in order to expand his mercies?
Well, again, it's just my opinion. Other people may have much better ideas. But I think that you just hit on the two fundamental activities that ISKCON was set up for, which is distribution of Prabhupada's books and distribution of prasadam. That was Prabhupada's whole program. And chanting. More chanting. We were riding from Pittsburgh Airport to New Vrindavan in 1976. Kid Narendra was there. There was about 40, 50 devotees from New Vrindavan that came to the airport to greet us. And then it was about an hour and a half's ride. So Prabhupada, he told Kid Narendra, he was reminiscing about the early days. It was exactly 10 years since they met in New York. And Prabhupada said that, from the beginning he said, this was my program, that I'll give them nice prasadam, I'll give them chanting, and they will not come, they must come. Talking about, just the regular conditioned souls. He said, this was my program, you all know it from the very beginning. Alright, give them something nice to eat, give them some chanting and dancing, and go home. No talk. Just come, eat, chant, and go home. He said, then later on, Chaito Darpa Namajana, when the heart becomes a little purified, then you can have some discussion. So Prabhupada, he had a program for spreading Krishna consciousness. The essential, or the basis part was, prasadam and chanting. And of course, later on as more of his books came out, actually selling people books so that they have something tangible that they can, get benefit from. So, without doing those essential programs, I can't see how you can be successful in doing anything else. We shouldn't think now that we become more sophisticated and that we can go beyond the basic programs that Prabhupada identified as being the most potent in purifying people. You give people prasadam, you let them hear the chanting. You've got your Rathayatra, that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter, if there's no immediate reaction, but if people hear the chanting, somehow or another they get some nice prasadam, they're on the way. Their spiritual lives have begun. So, if you want to glorify Srila Prabhupada, I don't think that you could do a better effort than increasing those basic activities that he gave us. There's lots of other areas that you can do things, like preaching in the colleges. There are lots of programs, but this is the basic effort. Rathayatra was one of the, it was the first festival, practically, that Prabhupada introduced, apart from, Lord Purnima and Janmashtami, but it was the first big festival, outreach program, right from 67 onwards. That should tell you about how significant Rathayatra is. I was just discussing with Agni Devaru that I hope this doesn't contradict any local policies, but in Malaysia now they're built up to such a degree that they do 35 Rathayatras every year. It's almost like
That's Muslim country.
and it's in a majority Muslim country. But they go all over Malaysia having Rathayatras. So they may not be on the big scale that, say, we saw in New York, but thousands of people see the Rath, they see the Lord, they hear the chanting, they get some prasadam, they get purified, they're on the way. So that's what we're all about. So if you want to celebrate Prabhupada's 50th anniversary, as he told the devotees in Los Angeles, when they sent him a combined letter, praising him for his Vyasa Puja and glorifying him. And Prabhupada thanked them for it, and he said, if you really want to please me, they said, we'll do anything to please you. So he said, if you really want to please me, then preach like me. If you really want to please me, preach like me. That's how you please Prabhupada. So whatever that means in your local context, how to preach, do it, increase it, make special effort, make special programs throughout the year, to call the public's attention to Srila Prabhupada's 50th anniversary of his arrival in the West. That's a news item. Get your TV people in, get your newspaper people in, give them the history, of ISKCON, give them the history of Srila Prabhupada. They'll advertise it. And as soon as Krishna's name appears in the newspaper, you're preaching. Yeah?
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you were talking about
I really can't hear you.
you were talking about devotees cooperating and managing. I just want us to make one point. My Sachu Maharaj, he was giving us some talk and he was making the point that he was complaining to Srila Prabhupada about one devotee. He said he just wanted that devotee, all he wanted to do is screw things, and Guru Maharaj was complaining, he doesn't want to do anything. And Prabhupada said, that's all right, just let him, if he just screw one thing in the temple, that he benefited going back home.
Yes, okay, so you're just saying that sometimes you get devotees that don't really want to do very much, but even if they can just do one small thing, they should be encouraged to do it. Yeah, that's the expertise of the managers. I know sometimes in different temples there's what we call the ecstasy crew, or we used to call them the ecstasy crew. They were the ones that would only show up on a Sunday and not in time for the Sunday feast lecture, but just at the end of it when the prasadam was going to be served out. So that, you get 10 or 20 people for the Sunday feast lecture, and all of a sudden at the end of it there's 200 people waiting to eat. So sometimes the devotees become a bit disturbed. These people are like hangers-on. They're only coming for the prasadam. But the reply to that is yes, that's good that they're only coming for the prasadam. They're not coming, to drink, I can go to a disco or, some restaurant they don't meet. They're coming for prasadam. That's a plus. And feed them as much as you can, because eventually they'll get purified to the point where they'll actually do something, apart from just eating. But, Chaturvidya Shri Bhagavat Prasadam. The spiritual master is happy if he sees people taking Bhagavat Prasadam. No charge, just come, eat as much as you like. That was Prabhupada's policy. So, if that's all a person can do is just come and eat prasadam, that's great. That's, advanced living Christian consciousness. What we want. Right? Yes, sir.
First, the court will come and comes again what it says. How does chanting in the Brahmanuta or in Japa, how does that help the devotees, whoever chanting in the Brahmanuta or Brahmanuta, how does chanting in Japa helps one?
How does chanting japa in the Brahma Muhurta hour help us? Well, the same as chanting japa at any hour. It purifies you. We say Brahma Muhurta because at that time of day our minds are usually fairly peaceful. The activities in the general, kami world are not yet started up at that time in the morning. The atmosphere is calm, so it enables you to easily concentrate on the holy names. And of course there's special benefit from doing things during the Brahma Muhurta. That's why we have Mangalarti at that time. There are certain periods of the day which are more auspicious than others, but for chanting it doesn't matter, because our principle is Kirtaniya Sada Hari, means chant Hare Krishna always at every moment. There's an example of Arjuna. One time Krishna went to see him and he was asleep. So Krishna was wondering, what does Arjuna think about when he's sleeping? Because we know what we think about when we're sleeping, or maybe we don't know what we're thinking about when we're sleeping. because we're in total ignorance. But Krishna leaned over and he lifted up Arjuna's hair, and his hair was chanting Hare Krishna. So what that means is he had a spiritual form. His entire body was vibrating the glories of the Supreme Lord. That's chanting Hare Krishna. So we have to get to that point. Yeah, Kirtaniya Sada Hari. But at least early in the morning, if you get your rounds done, fixed number, Prabhupada said that gives you numerical strength to accept a certain number of rounds and to make sure that you chant them every day, and it's easier to do it early in the morning before your minds get distracted and your senses get agitated. So if you do your fixed number of rounds every day, that will give you spiritual strength and discipline. And accepting a certain fixed number, it means that even when you don't feel like doing it because you've made a vow, then you do it anyway. That means you're bringing your senses and your mind under control by accepting that austerity, if you like, of chanting that fixed number. So that's what Prabhupada called numerical strength. Yeah. And then later on, as you get purified, then you enjoy it. And then you get to a point where you can't not do it. You have to glorify Krishna in every moment. Everything, every word that you speak becomes kirtan. Yeah. So that's where we're aiming for, but it takes a little practice to go from being a conditioned soul to being a liberated soul. So that second stage of spontaneity in devotional service, that we have to be patient, we have to wait for that to manifest. And we do that by following the rules and regulations of sadhana bhakti, of which chanting, a fixed number of rounds every day is the linchpin. Prabhupada pointed out that Haridas Thakur, that was all he did. He chanted 300,000 names a day, which is about 192 rounds every single day. But he said Rupa Goswami was chanting less because he was writing books. So writing books is also japa. It's also kirtan. Yeah. So it's not that they have to accept a fixed number of rounds every day because they're liberated souls. But to show an example for others and for their followers, then they set certain standards, and everybody then was held to follow that. So for us, Prabhupada told us that we should chant 16 rounds a day. Minimum. Said if you want to chant more than that, you're welcome to do it if you can do it. But the minimum is 16 rounds. And then gradually you build up. So
another thing is that in this country the game is all around. For instance, the demand by ignorance, but the artists decided Rama. So they say like it's very important. Rasa Rama, Veda Rama, after he named a building, Veda Rama, so the name Rama, the gas tank, Rama, so he named his own computer, the Patra Rama, Hari, Rama, so let you know what's the benefit of the chanting the holy name unknowingly.
what's the benefit of chanting the holy names unknowingly? You get purified. You get to a point where you come to know what the meaning of chanting is. And then you come to a point where you actually start to interact with the holy name. There's gradual stages of development, but it has to begin somewhere. People are in ignorance, but if they hear Krishna's name or they eat prasadam, they don't know what it is. But that's called Ajnata Sukriti. We mentioned this the other day. Prabhupada defines Sukriti as being the way by which we can approach the Supreme Lord. So when people unconsciously hear it, or without recognizing the real value of it, it purifies them. And they'll gradually come to a point where there'll be some enlightenment, because their Sukriti is being increased. So that's our program, Conditioned Souls. We want to increase their Sukriti. That's Ajnata Sukriti is done unknowingly. You make some advancement, and Sukriti means you knowingly make advancement. So we have to introduce people to Krishna somewhere, somehow. therefore, sometimes when there was adverse publicity, about the Hare Krishna movement, sometimes you get, nasty articles printed in the newspapers, and the Prabhupada would say, well, that's good. If they say Hare Krishna is bad, that's good. Because they've said Hare Krishna. So even, apparently negative reactions in the beginning, but the holy name has entered into their ears. It's penetrated their hearts, and the more that does that, the more they get purified, and then they'll change their minds.
You Muslims call it like this. Could you tell me something about the church masjid and the imam, the priest, about the Hare Krishna here? One that was up and said, this is how
You
to be Lord.
completely lost me on this one. Anyway, you had two questions.
That's somebody else.
That's enough to say. All right, any other last questions? We should be finishing. Sorry.
Really quick, one question, because you mentioned management and enthusiasm, and I've noticed sometimes when things are managed in a certain way where people are not happy with it or they don't agree with it, they lose enthusiasm, and a lot of times they'll leave. They'll say, oh, well, I don't like how they're doing that, so I'm just going to leave. What would be the suggestion? And as an example, I would like to place, we were in a temple one time where the management was driving people away, saying that they were just here for the prasadam. So they would close the door and say it was a private event. We were not in agreement with it. It bothered us to the point that we just decided we were going to leave. We didn't want to be part of that situation. We didn't want to leave. We wanted to be there, and we would have liked to maybe had a conversation with them or tell them, hey, I don't think that this is the way that we're supposed to do things. But because we felt like we were not in that position to do so, we just didn't know how to act. So what would be the proper way of going about?
Every situation has its own unique features and personalities. It's very difficult to comment, with a general instruction. But Prabhupada was once asked about, why devotees leave and whose fault is that? And apparently Prabhupada did say that it's 50% their fault and it's 50% the management's fault. In other words, you've got to figure out some common ground. And the point that I was making about Prabhupada's enthusiasm is that although he didn't get any cooperation, from anybody, from his godbrothers, and got no help from anybody else, still his enthusiasm was maintained. So if you lose enthusiasm, you have to look and see whether that's because your enthusiasm has come from the mode of passion or not. Because if it's coming from the spiritual platform, you won't lose it. If you lose enthusiasm, go away, and stop practicing devotional service, that means that your enthusiasm was based on the mode of passion. Because mode of passion means that you're looking for a result. If you don't get the result, then immediately you lose interest. That's not real enthusiasm. Enthusiasm means that you get no result for 12 years. And you're still out there, determined to do something to please your spiritual master. And that means that you're in a mood of where you're willing to cooperate with anybody as long as it results in the spreading of the holy names. If you look at Prabhupada's letters from 65, 66, 67, he tried like anything to get his godbrothers, to send some men to help him. He even told Tirtha Maharaj, I'll establish a branch of the Gaudiya Mat, I'm just here to preach. But they wouldn't cooperate with him. But it didn't stop Prabhupada from going on. He kept on with his preaching and created, a new circumstance through which he could do it. So we have to see in ourselves, if we lose enthusiasm, why we're losing enthusiasm. Are we ourselves following strictly? Are we, practicing the Four Elements principles? Are we chanting our rounds? Many times you'll see that people that complain the most are the ones that are not actually very strict in their own sadhana. That's because they're more in touch with the mode of passion and ignorance. and that fault-finding mentality comes out more. But if somebody's actually practicing nicely, that tendency to criticize will die down, and you look for common ground, and and there are levels of cooperation that you can achieve, whereby everybody can maintain their enthusiasm. So, in general, there's two parties concerned. It may be that in some circumstances somebody, is like a dictator and driving everybody out. That's another thing. There's different ways of dealing with that. We have, at least now in ISKCON, some levels of, investigation, appeal. People can actually ask for arbitration. We have this, what's it called? ISKCON Resolve. If things get to a point where you absolutely can't agree, you can call in the ISKCON Resolve devotees and they'll try to help you to figure out, some levels of cooperation and compromise. So it requires goodwill from all sides. If somebody's acting out of their own ego, then you're going to have problems. Either the managers or those that are being managed. But if it's done on that level of false ego, not of passion and ignorance, then you're not going to be successful. You can only push on a spiritual movement from the spiritual platform. And the spiritual platform is recognized as being that platform of ultimate cooperation. That's what's going on in the spiritual world. It's in perfect harmony. Everybody's individual, but at the same time everybody's in perfect harmony in the idea of pleasing Krishna. That's the spiritual world. So that should reflect even in our material circumstances that we practice our devotional service. If there's real spirituality, there should be real cooperation. That comes from higher realization, at least from the mode of goodness and the Sudasattva platform. But if we're remaining on this lower level of, being influenced by the lower modes of nature, then you'll always have problems. You'll always be, you'll have problems in yourself and you'll have problems with the people that you have to deal with as well. Alright? Okay, we really have to finish this 9:05. So I'd like to thank all the devotees, Rajarishi. Is it Rajarshi or Rajarishi?
Rajarshi.
Rajarshi. Prabhu, because he invited me when I saw him in Mayapur, 2 or 3 times actually. So we finally got around to doing it. I'd like to thank the managers and all the devotees for a nice turnout. It's always wonderful to be able to sit and speak in a company of devotees about Srila Prabhupada. And I pray to Radha Gopinath, who, by the way, the first deities that I ever saw were Radha Gopinath in Sydney. So, and they're just as beautiful and as cute as your Radha Gopinath. So anyway, by their grace, if I can come back again at some point, that will be very nice. So thank you all very much.